Chris, can you hear me? Perfect. All right.
She's got it.
So I have, I started to delve into the listings because I'm starting to get listings from the new people. And I was just thinking it isn't fair to go into a new listing and then not know what documents you need. If you don't have a setup in your transaction desk under templates, do you remember how we do that?
Yes.
Yes, that is so helpful. Once you go in there and you do it, and then you can put in things like right here on this form, you can put in Keller Williams Realty NCW. And then every time you download that template, then that's already filled in there for you. So as I got into this, I went down about 3 rabbit holes, and one of them was common interest. The other was accessibility and what happens. And then I had to step back and say, okay, today, we're just going to look at what are the documents that we need. And there may be some other documents that I have missed, but this is when I set up a listing for a residence. These are the documents that I have. And then what I'd like to show you is after I get it all filled out and you get ready, you sign it, then you have 48 hours to get it up into command. And then I go through and I really look at just some key things. So I thought today, if I just cover what the documents are and what are the key things that I look for, then next week I want to come back, especially to the listing input sheet. And I just want to spend some time on that because there are some things there that forms like a common interest. Can anybody give me a real simple definition of what that means? You know, in your input sheet where you fill out the common interest. Let me just see if I can find it. Most of the time, right here, most of the time it's left blank.
Oh, common interest community is like,
Yeah.
almost like a condo association, but it's more modernized and it's a shared.
Mhm,
Well, not all condos. Common.
mhm. So it has to do with the date. When was it formed? If it was before or after July 1st, 2018. And it has to do with all kinds of things. So when I was looking at it, I found 3 forms that I've never seen that really need to be filled out. If it's a condo, you know, the resale certificate. I started looking at that and thinking, oh my gosh, you know, there's so much of that I don't know about. So what I wanted to do today is take a look at just what are the documents that we need for just for let me see, and just there we go. So we see it a little bit more to be able to establish a residential listing. And these are the ones that I start out with. And then there are sometimes that there are other documents that are needed, but these are pretty much a general rule of thumb. I also like the form 1A-SWF. And SWF, the only way I remember that is because
Sorry, did you need me?
I did, but I got help and we're going. Thank you. Yeah, so much for abandoning me. Oh, I thought she could hear me.
Are you showing something you should be seeing?
So anyways, the reason I like that particular form is because in definition number 1, that's when you can write in Northwest MLS or NWMLS and then KWMLS. And that way it just lets them know that we're putting it into 2 different systems. And command and when you're entering this is a pain to do, but it's really important that you do it. Ashley, I wanted to have Ashley join us one day and talk about how do we set that up, because as it pertains too, other than compliance. I really don't know that much about command because our frontline team always had somebody that we just gave all the documents to and they filled it for us. So it's like I'm a rich girl and I've never had to do that. So this is what I look for, and these are the places where I see the most common mistakes. Your exclusive sale and listing agreement, you can literally sign this the very first time, and you can have it where the listing date is actually 30 days out. Now, most of you know that. If you have a question coming through, there are no dumb questions, just, ask. So the list,
I do have a question. I don't know how to get forms like that. All.
do you have your connection to Northwest MLS yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's touch screen.
Oh, you can. No. Shit. Oh,
And then
Where you need to go.
Jose, when we're done, I'll show you how to set up one template.
okay, perfect.
And then if you can figure out how to do the others, or you come in and Tom and I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that the listing term that I see is a lot of times it will be the same date as the listing date. Well, that means you're going to list it and terminate it on the same day. So that's one thing that I see happen a lot. And then the list date, I always look at the list date and then I look at the signatures down here on the bottom. Because we are allowed 30 days. And that's to get the property ready and all of that kind of stuff. When we come back and we go over these forms individually, I think it's really important that we maybe talk a little bit about how do we say it? Like Russ said earlier today, we can't say, it's our office policy that it's 3-3 or 2.5, or land 10%. I mean, each one we have to negotiate it with the your client. And then I didn't highlight this, but one of the number one things that I see is that it's not signed by the seller. And then also on the last page, the broker. So those are just some things that I see coming through that I have to send it back. Typically, if they don't fill this in, then it's 188 days. Does anybody know what that means, the tail?
How many days past the listing expiring that you can claim compensation if it's buyer?
If it was a buyer you brought, yes. So this is a really important date here. 180 days is a long time. And so it's just an individual thing that you might want to have. And then of course we're going to go through these individually, but again, the seller's initials and date, and then here the listing firm, you can set that up so that it always comes up, and then just make sure that you get your broker's signature. So the first document that we really work on is a listing agreement. And that's what gives us the protection to go out there and get started in doing all of that work. Are listings easy? Getting a new listing up? No, they're hard. And there's so many little pieces to it. So the number one thing that I usually see when you've submitted it to command, you don't have your MLS number here. That happens more than 50% of the time.
I'm sorry, a text from Sarah Reed. She said, are we supposed to be seeing Marsha's screen?
Oh,
Did you log into Zoom? She's on Zoom. I asked her if she logged into Zoom.
Go back
She said
to-
yes.
okay.
Go back to Zoom. I don't know if you share your screen. Probably the one. Share screen. Then go back to the.
That one,
No, the one below it.
that one.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one.
Thank you.
Share, press the share button.
Whoop.
On the right hand side.
Oh, there we
There you
go. Thank you. See what happens?
Ask them if they can see it now.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
You can see ours. I'll get on so I can follow it.
Okay, alrighty. So this listing input sheet is, as you know, is what goes into the Northwest MLS. Not everything needs to be filled out, or is it applicable? But there are some things when you fill in the screen, when you go into the transaction desk, the very first thing that you should know is that you're not really going to get this listing number until you get this thing pretty well filled out. And before you have your client sign it, then you have to go in the transaction desk on the upper right-hand corner. On this form, it will say upload listing, which I'm sure most of you know. And then you need to make sure that if you make any changes, because this goes into the input on your, it's just easier if I show you. It's up here. And did you see where the forms were? Did he show you where they were?
Yeah.
Just a second. I can't put my login without. Okay, so when you go in to Northwest MLS and you have opened up your transaction desk, oh, I did it wrong. Is there any way I could get rid of that? Oh, there we go. Then you hit this and you open up a new transaction. And then when you do that, then the template, then you can pull down, like I have MB condo listing, PSA, vacant land listing, residential listing. And then these are some that are already supplied for you there, but I can go in and click on mine and then it will bring down all the documents that I have. If you want to set up your,
Resume the share.
oh, thank you. Now, where did that go? If you want to set up your templates, then I think everyone knows how to do that. And Jose, I'll share that with you. Okay, so when I look at this input form, then you need to go through with your client and find as much information as you possibly can. And not all of it can be filled out. For an example, I rarely ever set on the listing price until after I do a CMA for them. And so that's something you come back and then you have to put it in here. And then you also go back to the Northwest MLS, to the input tab, put in the new listing number that you've been assigned. And then you have to go back and any information that you put new here, you have to make sure you put there or vice versa. Does that make sense? Okay. One of the most important things is when I feel really confident I'm going to get a listing agreement, then I always order the preliminary title because that's where your legal legal description comes from, and that's the one you want to end up with. And I do have a copy in here of a temporary one that you can fill out yourself from the like the Chelan County Assessor's page, and I'll show you how if you need one temporarily. Aaron, you had one the other day where they called you out on it. That there was no legal description.
Yeah.
And there are some brokers that they'll just put a legal description under additional broker remarks. They have a program that when that goes live, that automatically spits it out if you don't have the header legal description, even though it's in your associated docs, if it doesn't have that header. I always order that, and usually one day, maybe two at the most, they can at a minimum get a legal description back to you if it's a real fast. We're going to list this, like today's Tuesday, we're going to list it on Friday. They can get that. And if you ask them for it, they can get that right back to you. Okay, so this is the form that you go through and you fill out. The listing address on page 2 is an autofill, and you need to put the street number, the street name, the city, state, and zip code. Just have it be a complete listing. Can you imagine all the brokers here when we get a document and it doesn't have a listing, I mean, an address? If it's not complete or whatever, it's just a good habit to get into. Let me see what else I always look for. Sometimes here on this particular page, the accessibility features. If you click one of these, then that automatically will turn it out and they'll send you a compliance, because there's a form 6B that's 3 pages long that have to do with anything for handicap accessibility or anything like that. One was not particularly designed for accessibility, but the front door was a big door. It was really wide. And so I thought, well, gee, I'll click that. And then I got a compliance thing very quickly. And so you just sit down with if you fill out any of these blocks, you just sit down and with your seller and just go through it. And it's real easy. Most of it doesn't apply, but whatever does makes it really easy to do. Another thing that I found all kinds of documentation for, especially the new homes, if they're green certified, there are forms that we need to fill out, and it doesn't really take that long, but it's really nice to have up in your associated docs. All of this, when we go through each of these individually, we'll go into more detail. Another area that I get input sheets in, I get them signed by the sellers, but there's not a marketing remark, there's not broker remarks, and there's no direction. So that's usually when you upload it and you get a number, and then you go back into the input part of Northwest MLS and you're filling all that information in, and you forget to make sure that it's here on that. And then on all these pages, then the seller initials, date, and also your initials and date are there. Here is just an example of when I don't have a preliminary title report back. I title it Exhibit A, Legal Description. I put in the number of acres, and you get this all on your county assessor's sheet. The county name, tax parcel number, the county name, legal description, and then you just copy it word for word. And then the moment you get your preliminary title report that has your legal description, then you can input that. And what has to be, here's an example of a real one. What has to be on when you input this up in associated docs or into command? Besides this, what has to be on this page? Yeah, just have your seller's initial it, and then you're good to go. Okay, so far we've covered the listing agreement, the input sheet. You need to make a legal description. And then my favorite, Form 17. And the areas that I find that are not complete is, well, first of all, with your seller, you need to go through and almost read this word for word and say, I cannot fill this out for you. But this is what happens if it's not fully filled out. Even if they say they've received it up until the day of closing, they can use an incomplete form and just really talk with them about how important this is. The other day, I got one from Lisa Boyle. It was the most beautiful Form 17 I've ever seen in my life. It was perfect. As many of them are. Always even if they don't know or it's not applicable. And their initials. I'm unstable. Can you believe that? And then here, oh, I wanted to point out too, Section 4 is structural, and you'll see that almost every single one of these has an asterisk on it. And Section 7 is environmental, especially Section 7. Do you know that a buyer can say, I don't need to see it. Thank you very much. And they can just, that's that third line down there. They can just remove it. However, if there's any 7 answers, environmental, that have an asterisk, then they have to receive at least that part of it. And as you can see, every one of these in 7 have an asterisk. And then, of course, the seller signs here. And then here's the place where they go back to every asterisk yes answer. Some of them are dumb. Like if they say, has this house been inspected or whatever, it has an asterisk by it, and you click yes. The next line said, what's the name of the company? Well, if they answer that, I never go any further than that. That's, to me, that's complete. So we have a listing agreement, we have our input sheet, we have our legal, and then usually what I like to do is I like to walk through this with them, leave it with them, and have them give that back to me, but not at the first, when you're having them sign the listing agreement or the input sheet. So that is Form 17. I cannot tell you if we need to have this go to our sellers or not, but I always did because I think it's good to have a conversation. And the way my conversation went with them is I would say, Seth, this is a form by law I need to share with you and give it to you. I need your initials and date along the top. And what I would like you to do is if you ever have trouble sleeping, you just read this document and it puts you right to sleep. And then I just say, it just talks about my responsibility. Either I am a buyer broker, I'm a selling, for the sellers, a listing broker, or I'm a dual agent. And then you can just talk whatever your yada yada is about that. But it's important that we get that on this first page because it's just initials and a date. We should be doing at the beginning of every listing appointment or every showing. And so what I do on my number 1 sheet that I keep, because I print 2 number 1 pages, is on the back of it, I put the date and then I write out the client's name. Because if you're showing a lot of clients' property, even if they don't buy from you, but all of a sudden they come back and you've already done that, you can either redo it or you can have a system to be able to go back and find it. Okay, so that is that one. And then also agency disclosure, where you are going to put, is it a buyer or seller, or buyer and seller? And then there's a drop down for whatever your client is here. And then your name, your signature, your firm's name, and you're done. And that just kind of reiterates the agency law and protects you. This is one that I think that at the first signing, you can get it done, get it filled out correctly, and get it over with. Line number 10 is probably the one thing I see the most that isn't checked. And if you have an address in here, I don't know why, but check that box. And when you put this into your templates, check it there. So it'll always be checked. And that way you don't miss it. And then as a double negative, explaining that, and remember, never ever put their social security number. And if
Is it
the,
okay to put 3 dots in there, so they know not to put anything in?
you know, on mine, what I do is I put 3 X's dash, isn't it 4? And that, no, 3 and then 4. And I just put that in there and I just explain to them, escrow will get that from you. I don't need to know it. And we don't need to have that in your written documents.
I like
Yeah.
to put it in there just so you know.
Yeah, they don't have to. I found out something really interesting about the FERPTA. There are some situations in land, if they're not going to build, that we don't need to use it. But the explanation of it is so quirky. The escrow knows, and they can ask if you're selling a home and it's under 300,000, you have to check that box and then have your buyers sign it and date it. If they've checked the box am not, meaning that they have a tax ID number and they whatever, then you don't have to fill out the bottom of it. On mine, I like to have the buyer's initials on it because it shows that they've seen it, they understand it, and especially I'm seeing a lot more where the I am is checked.
The wording confusing. You don't read the.
Oh, it is very confusing. And how they can buy property, I don't know, but that's okay. But especially then we need to educate our buyers in that the reason you need this document and we need to get it to escrow because the buyer will be responsible for taxes. And I believe it's 10, 15 or 20%.
That was 5.
Is it? Yeah. How horrible to buy something and then come back and get a tax bill. Yeah. Okay. If the house is older than, okay, Jose, if the house is older than what year do we do a 22J? And I'm putting you on the.
78.
Mhm. Yeah. So then we would need to introduce this. If the property, the house is older than 1978, we would do this. And just remember, when you fill it out and you put it up above, you don't know the date and you don't know the buyer's name, but you can fill in this and then have them identify if they know or don't know, if they have documents or they don't, and then have them sign it and date it. And then you can do it 2 ways. You can have them do seller initials, or you can wait until the offer comes through. And that's one of the things that they need to do. And then remember the buyer broker and the listing broker. I see that a lot where one of them The names and addresses of all utilities providing service to the property and having lien rights are as follows. So the seller is responsible for giving that information. So as a listing broker, leave this with them and just tell them, let's say it is Zippy's, and just say, what is the address, city and state, and fill that in. If you know the website, I like to put in the telephone number for customer service. But it's not necessary. So those are the things that we need when we do a listing for a residence. What am I missing? Am I missing anything?
That's a good question, Marsha.
Yes.
On the 22K, you know how we can send the seller disclosure? We can email it and it can be edited by the seller. They can fill it out. Do you know if we can do that with the 22K?
Mhm.
Like in situations where maybe you're not face to face with the seller.
Yeah, I mean, if you know that and you want to provide that service for your seller, then absolutely. It technically, legally is the seller's, and this is a state form, so it's not a contract. It is a contract form because it's deliverable. You have to give them that information. But the state statute dictates, here's your RCW and the number, and it dictates what has to happen. And then, as Tom pointed out, I think last week, it is real clear, shall be delivered, but then the brokers may, that kind of a thing. Just provide them really good service. Once you go through all of this, when you're on your listing appointment, what are some other key topics that you cover with them?
Wire fraud.
Okay, wire fraud. Very, very important.
Compensation. Everybody's gonna get paid because they spend 100 times.
Yeah,
Why am I paying buyers?
yeah. And you need to tell them that's optional. But if you really want to sell your home, it's really a good idea to have something in there. So that other brokers will, otherwise they come back and they negotiate it when they put the offer in. They ask for it then. Okay, so we've got the wire fraud. That's really important. I'm just trying to think, okay. So some of the things that I like to go over is drone work. And if we have brokers in our team that pay for that, that's part of their service. And that's when they say, this is why I'm getting 6%, 3 on the listing. And if I bring a buyer, I get this because this is what I'm doing for you. One of the things that you can do when you look through a person's home and you want to have a tour is you can tell them, okay, let's work with positive expectancy. We're going to sell this home. So let's start by boxing up the things that you don't need for this season. And you can put them in your garage, or if you have a storage unit or something like that, and talk about how important it is to declutter. Because when you have a buyer come into their home, what do you want them to see?
There's something.
You want them to visualize, and I will do that with a buyer. I'll say, when I first walked in this door, you know what I saw? And I said, I saw my baby grand piano right here. And then then I'll ask them, what do you see? And guess what that is? Little itty bitty buying steps, or they'll walk in. Okay. So anyway, so we want to talk about declutter. We want to talk about the yard. Just a couple of days ago, there was somebody that didn't want to buy the property because the lawn wasn't as green as the pictures. It's summer. And it's like, wow, how expensive is green paint? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, let me see here. And we want to talk about valuables. Like this morning, I didn't put on any jewelry. So we need to make sure that they understand if you have a chest or drawer, what are the odds somebody's going to look in your drawer?
Decent. If they have a negligent broker with them.
They shouldn't, should they?
No.
No. Or, you know, they want to look in the cupboards. But if there's anything there of value, also when you're setting up a showing, that is such a great point. If you keep everybody together, let's go through this together and let's get all of our thoughts. Another thing that we need to tell our buyers is that many homes have video cameras. You're not supposed to have the audio on when you go in and show somebody's home. What are the odds they're going to be there? Ooh, they really like that. Ooh, and then they give me this offer. You know, so just before you go in there, just, you know, you can talk and ask questions and stuff like that, but just let them know that there may be a video where people are watching. And this has happened to me where I got a call before I got out of the driveway. The other brokers calling me and saying, you didn't lock the back door, or you left, you know, you didn't put the blind down or something, you know. So it's really important when we go through that we're aware that sometimes they're watching it. And the reason I say this, Anna Marie in Brewster had this woman that had this beautiful home. Brewster's property values is probably 100 to 200,000 less than here, and maybe 300,000 from Chelan. If she had her home in Chelan, it would have been worth a lot more. The buyer's broker and the buyers were going through her underwear drawer and through, yeah. And so anyways, then they put the thing that you can't show it unless the listing broker is there. Well, what a pain. And how horrible. And then the lady denied it. And she said, not only did she see you, it's on tape. Do you want me to send it to you? So that whole thing, respecting that and having, especially if there are, I'm curious if there's a cabinet for like linen, I do want to look at that. I like to look at the drawers. I want to see if there's soft touch. Yeah,
So,
but not the underwear. Yeah.
and I just say that I used to do residential pest control, and I would service vacation homes, and throughout the years of doing it, I wouldn't discover cams for quite a while now.
Mm-hmm.
But I would stumble into them, and I'd say 50% of homes, it might look like a phone charger with a camera lens in it, or there's a lock you can buy.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know.
Assume that you are.
So you're always on camera, don't take a nap on the couch, especially with your shoes on. But yeah, it's and again, most of those outdoor cameras have audio.
Yeah.
They might say they're not recording it, but they are.
Yeah, if they have the ability, they are. Yeah, especially if they have teenagers. I didn't have that, but I would have loved it. However, I did have a heating vent that when I went in the basement to do the laundry, the boys' bedroom was right there. And as young preteens, they'd be talking about all the stuff they wanted to get into and do. And then I'd go up and I'd say, and if you think you're going to, and their eyes would get really big. And then the oldest one discovered how I found that out. So that didn't work after that. Okay. In the minutes, Sarah, I'll be sending out a list of every form. I don't know when you put that in there, but okay. All right. So that pretty much covers it. When you go for a preliminary thing and you're talking with them, and then you maybe, I like to do at least 2 visits. And one of them I say, if you're not ready for me to walk through, then we can do this next time. But it's really important for you to visually go through and give ideas and comments about what to do to kind of just, and it's not that their stuff is clutter, but we see it that way. And if there are personal pictures on the wall, like I had a whole hall wall of when my kids, when I was first married, and then when they're little and blah, 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 you're going to have to pack that stuff up. I don't really want strangers to be looking at that kind of stuff. So, just be real cognizant of that. All right. So that is a house, residential. Screen sharing is closed. Can you guys see that? I guess right now it and share. Let me go back. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to take a look at vacant land. Chris, I can see you. Can you see this document? Now I can't even find it. There it is. Can you see exclusive sale and listing up on the screen? Perfect. All right. So vacant land, your listing agreement is the same. And so I'm not going to spend any time on that. And then the legal description is very important. And then the vacant land only has 4 pages. There are, let's see, pretty much what I talked about on the residential, just making sure that you've got the address, the MLS number, and that it is fully signed. I noticed that zoning or zoning jurisdiction is never, hardly ever filled out. And if you don't know how to do that, then we can take a look at, and especially when Tom is here, because he can show you how to do that quite easily. That particular part of it is the same thing. Is make sure you have marketing remarks, and I like to put where I've done the preliminary title, any showing instructions, any special terms. If vacant land, if it's seller financing is available, then you can reiterate it here where they'll see it easier than that one little box down there where it's checked seller financing available. And I have 4 lots right now that are not selling. And so I've had a conversation with all of my sellers about how about if we offer seller financing. And when you do that on vacant land, if you have that listing, do you know what is a pretty good rule of thumb? If somebody has to go out and get financing, do you know what typically a percentage of down that they need? Yeah, at least 20, but typically 25 to 30% down. And so if you look at that and the price of the land, and that's at least, and that way that can put some money in the seller's pocket, and it can pay all the closing costs and anything else. But then they have like an annuity for 2 years if they have a 2-year balloon, a 5-year balloon. And sometimes that's really advantageous it helps them to take the cost over several years or the income if you sell it above what you sold it. One of the things that I saw when I was researching this is that Northwest MLS really doesn't like you to put the GPS coordinates in your driving instructions. And I have one broker that everything it's use your GPS. And I had a very polite conversation with her. Have you ever not had your GPS work properly? I have, and it's been scary. You are liable if you put that in there and they follow it and they get someplace they shouldn't be or whatever. Use verbal instructions. And the easiest way to do that is to put the address into your maps, your Google Maps. And then like if it's, and I only do this because this is what I'm familiar with. If it's like from downtown Chelan is the starting point, then ask for directions how to get there. And they're printed right out there. And so you just abbreviate and bring that over, but really make sure that you don't ever put. Now, some of the times, if it's remote property, Tom will, he will find it on Google Earth and he'll find the coordinates there. And then that will be in addition to the written ones, that will be something that we will have in the associated docs. But you want to caution people, put that into your phone before you leave, because where you're going, there's no cell phone signal. But if you have it in your phone, then almost always that works. Oh. Okay, you're welcome, Sarah. The same thing, unimproved property, the Form 17 just looks a little bit different. Because there's nothing about a structure or anything like that. It's the same thing. Make sure that on that line 34, you check, is it occupied or not? And then make sure that they go through and fill out everything. We've already talked about that, so I'm not going to do that again. Okay, and then for sure you'll want your Washington State pamphlet with initials and date of the sellers. I should have just put the first page in here. The next one, I think there's one more. Well, we do a FERPTA. Oh, I'm sorry, agency disclosure. And fill that out. And then a FERPTA. And if it's vacant land and it has power to it, then you'll need to do a 22K. May even have, like there's some, Lois is selling some property out in Malaga that has like a water district. So the water is hooked up to the property line. Power is hooked up to the property line. But they don't have an invoice. They're not being billed yet. So in that case, you wouldn't need one. However, if you have a well and a pump and power, then you're getting an invoice or from someplace. And that's it. I'm just trying to think. Land. When you're doing your listing appointment for land, pretty much the same thing. Usually I do it all in one because there's no property to look at and evaluate, no house. Make sure, oh, something on land that can be really helpful. Does anybody here have, is it Hunt OnX or is it OnX Hunt? That is more accurate than the county. Yeah.
You can even press a button, I think, and walk.
Yes, and it will be an approximation. Yeah. me think what else is really helpful. Tom is helping Lois flag this property. It was all one seller, and then they took the lot, and then they took a quarter of it and back to the seller, so they had a boundary line adjustment. And the old driveway goes right into the new property that's not for sale, so they're helping to flag. Flags are pretty good. I mean, you get your stake and you can spray paint it orange, red, pink, whatever you want to do. And then the flagging is like, you buy it in rolls like that. And then you just different colors so that when you walk up, it's real easy to see. That's a good thing to help a land seller out with that. Any questions on those two? Vacant land. Any questions? Oh, we got a couple of things out here. Maria says, yes, I love that app. That is a great app. All right. Any questions out there? All right. Thank you for attending. Marion, I see you're there, but you're not there. Let's see if there's anybody else. Maria. Oh, and Keith. Hey, Keith. So any other questions? If not, I'm going to close it down. And I stop sharing. All right, everybody have a great day. All righty, we will see you next week, and we'll go into those documents a little bit further.
Thank you, Marsha.